Louise Henson. On the morning of August 30th, 1989, two cyclists found the naked body of a woman in a dry ditch along the Lunderweg in Domelen, a small village in the municipality of Valkenswaard, North Brabant. She wore only white sports socks. Her jeans, leather vest, one boot, and a lighter from the Lucky Bar in Budel lay scattered around her. Her left boot, underwear, bra, and shirt were never found. A ring engraved MLH confirmed her identity. She had been strangled. 37 years later, this remains the Netherlands' longest-running cold case. So who took Louise Henson, and why has every lead gone cold? Marie-Louise Louise Henson was born on February 7, 1957, in Budel, North Brabant. She had a twin sister, Vera, and an older sister, Annelies. She worked as a domestic helper at a monastery in Weert and supplemented her income babysitting her nieces and nephews, who considered her a second mother. Described as remarkably strong, social, and outgoing, she was a fixture of Budel's weekend nightlife. She was single at 32, had no children, but was actively pursuing artificial insemination. Her first attempt had failed, and she planned to try again after the local fair. That fair would be the last place she was seen alive. On the evening of August 29, 1989, during Budel's annual kermis, Louise walked to the fairground between 6 and 7 in the evening. Multiple witnesses saw her there in the company of two unidentified young men, one with bleached blonde curly hair, the other dark-haired. Neither was recognized by any Budel locals. Around 9:45, the trio was ejected from the fairground after the blonde man sat on a carousel horse. That was the last confirmed sighting of Louise alive. Two men no one in Budel could identify. A woman who left with them and never came home. Where did they go in those 2 hours between the fairground and the ditch 25 kilometers away at approximately 11:45 that night? A resident named Franz on the Lunderweg was walking his dog when he saw an older model delivery van stop at a precise spot on the road. The headlights switched off. Two doors opened. After roughly 2 minutes of commotion in the cargo area, the van drove away without turning its lights back on. Franz noted the details, but had no reason at that hour to think anything of it. The next morning, the cyclists found Louise in that exact spot. The crime scene was 25 kilometers from Budel. Whoever was responsible had transport, knew the area well enough to find an isolated rural road in the dark, and had enough composure to carry out what they did and drive away calmly. An anonymous letter in November 1989 pointed to Sjaak, the owner of the Lucky Bar, as the person responsible. The letter was later traced to a 15-year-old girl named Anoushka Wiesenbeek, who herself was taken less than 5 months later in an unrelated, still unsolved case. The girl who wrote the anonymous tip became a victim herself before anyone could determine whether her information was accurate. 3 men, including Sjaak, were arrested and subjected to 14 interrogations over an extended period. One gave a partial, contradictory confession that he later retracted, claiming he had been pressured. All 3 were conclusively cleared by DNA and released. Sjaak received €9,000 in wrongful detention compensation. Every early lead was a dead end. The investigation had been aggressive, but aimed at the wrong people entirely. The breakthrough came in 2019 to 2021, when the Netherlands Forensic Institute used advanced DNA techniques to extract a male DNA profile from trace evidence collected in 1989. This profile does not match any entry in Dutch, Belgian, or German DNA databases. Police launched a major 2021 campaign featuring a VR, crime scene reconstruction, a Dutch first, a 4-part podcast, and doubled the reward to €30,000. Around 200 tips were received, but none proved decisive. In August 2024, the Peter R. de Vries Foundation featured the case in their Case Not Closed campaign, offering €100,000 for the golden tip, valid from November 2024 through May 2025. A citizen initiative at Vicensen.nl, run by Jupe Donkers and Sander Meyer, has formally requested a large-scale DNA kinship investigation, similar to those that solved the Vatstra and other Dutch cases. The technology exists. The community support exists. A poll of 1,417 residents showed 86% willing to voluntarily provide DNA. The case remains active with the Cold Case Team, East Brabant. The NFI has prepared an SNPD and NA profile suitable for genealogical database comparison, but the kinship investigation has not yet been authorized. The prosecution has expressed it was pleased with the civic initiative, but has taken no formal action. 37 years. A DNA profile sitting in a lab. A community ready to give their samples. And still no name. What is everyone waiting for? 37 years, and a community still waiting for permission to help solve it. But the next case was solved, and the answer came from within a family that had already planned every detail. Ryan Out-Jour. On the morning of May 28, 2024, a state forestry employee found the body of a young woman face down in shallow swamp water at the Oostvaardersplassen Nature Reserve near Lelystad. She was 18 years old. Her hands were bound behind her back, her ankles tied together, and her mouth and nose sealed shut with approximately 18 meters of duct tape. She had been thrown into the water alive. So who would do this to a teenager, and why did the answer lie inside her own family? Ryan al-Najjar was of Syrian origin, born in Idlib province. Her family, Father Khaled, 53, Mother Sumaya, 43, and 7 siblings, fled the civil war and arrived in the Netherlands around 2014 to 2016, settling in Joure, Friesland, in 2017. Ryan was a spirited young woman who streamed live on TikTok without a headscarf, wore Western clothing and makeup, and wanted to live independently. From 2022, she had been placed in various care institutions and shelters due to domestic concerns. She had cut off contact with her family and was hiding at a friend's house in Rotterdam. She was trying to disappear. She had been under police protection, but that protection was discontinued before her passing, despite prior reports that her father wanted to harm her. The system that was supposed to keep her safe had decided the threat had passed. It had not. On the evening of May 27th, her brothers Muhannad, 25, and Mohammed, 23, located her in Rotterdam and picked her up. How they found her remains unclear, but they knew exactly where she was hiding. Rather than driving home to Joure, they drove toward Lelystad via back roads, following WhatsApp instructions from their father Khaled, who drove separately in another vehicle. All three converged at the nature reserve after midnight. The digital evidence was devastating. Ryan's iPhone recorded 207 steps toward the scene. Her brother's phone logged the identical step count with his flashlight on, meaning they walked side by side in the dark, one of them lighting the way. Her phone showed no user activity after 1:04 in the morning on May 28th. Whatever happened at the water's edge happened in the minutes that followed. She showed strangulation marks, but the official cause of death was drowning. She was thrown into the water alive while bound and gagged. The brothers were arrested on June 3rd, 2024. On June 4th, Father Khaled sent an email to De Telegraaf confessing, "I ask you to publish that I am the one who killed." He had already fled the Netherlands, driving to Bremen, flying to Istanbul, and continuing to northern Syria. DNA evidence was overwhelming. The father's DNA was found on the tape's adhesive side and under Ryan's fingernails on 3 fingers, proving she fought back even while bound. WhatsApp messages in family group chats named Honorable Family documented extensive wishes for her harm. The messages were explicit and coordinated. The mother had written that Ryan deserved what was coming. A sister had written that harming her was justified. The father's instructions included directions to dump her in deep water and weigh down her legs. This was not a spontaneous act. It was planned in a family group chat. The court and prosecution formally classified this as an honor-related taking of life and femicide. Ryan was targeted because her family perceived her as behaving too Western, streaming on TikTok, wearing makeup, having male friends, wanting independence. On January 5th, 2026, the court delivered sentences exceeding the prosecution's demands. Father Khalid received 30 years, convicted in absentia. Brothers Muhammad and Mohammed each received 20 years. The court called it a tragic low point of a family history in which the oppression of women was the common thread. All three filed appeals in mid-January 2026. Khaled remains a fugitive in Syria, where he has remarried and started a new family. No extradition treaty exists with Syria, an 18-year-old who wanted to live her own life, a family that decided she did not have that right, and a father who confessed by email from another continent, a father who fled to Syria after confessing by email. But the next case consumed the Netherlands for 13 years, divided entire communities, and was finally solved by a method no one had ever tried before. Marianne Vaatstra. On the night of April 30th into May 1st, 1999, Queen's Day, a 16-year-old girl left a celebration at a venue called Paradiso in the village of Kolum, Friesland, and cycled home to Zwaagwesteinde alone. She never made it. Her bicycle was found in a ditch along the Kenningswy Road near Veenklooster. Her body was discovered in a nearby meadow by family members who had gone searching. She had been harmed, strangled with her own bra, and her throat was cut 3 times with a knife. A Playboy cigarette lighter found at the scene contained crucial DNA, trace evidence. So who was waiting on that road? And how did it take 13 years and a method never before used in the Netherlands to find him? Marianne Imke Vaatstra was born on August 10, 1982, in Zwaagwesteinde, the youngest of 6 children. Her father was Bouke Vaatstra. Her mother was Maaike Terpstra. Marianne worked at a local grocery store, loved hairstyling, played football, and dreamed of becoming a professional stylist. She was 16 years old. This became one of the largest police investigations in Dutch history. 12 suspects were arrested and released over the years as their DNA failed to match. Every time a name surfaced, the community held its breath, and every time the DNA came back negative. The nearby asylum seekers center near Kolum became a focal point of suspicion. Tensions ran high. An Iraqi refugee was tracked by Interpol across multiple countries, arrested in Istanbul, but cleared by DNA. The community's blame directed at asylum seekers persisted for over a decade, splitting Kolum and the surrounding villages into factions, despite DNA analysis indicating a northwestern European perpetrator. The science said one thing. The community believed another. Crime journalist Peter R. de Vries worked the case closely with the Vaatstra family for years, keeping it in the public eye when others had moved on. 13 years of us, finger-pointing, community tension, and not a single match. Was the answer ever going to come? It did, through science. An April 2012 law change made large-scale familial DNA searching legally permissible in the Netherlands, and the Vaatstra case was the first to use this capability. It was an unprecedented experiment. Nothing like it had been attempted in Europe. In September 2012, all men within a 5-kilometer radius of the crime scene, roughly 8,000 males across 12 villages, were asked to provide buccal swabs. The participation rate was extraordinary. 96% agreed. using the advanced Bonaparte software system developed specifically for kinship matching. The NF5 found a familial match after processing about 4,000 samples. The software flagged a relative of the perpetrator, and from there, investigators narrowed the field. On November 18, 2012, Jasper Staringa was arrested at his dairy farm in Aldwold, just 2.5 kilometers from the crime scene. He confessed within 10 minutes of meeting his lawyer. 10 minutes. After 13 years of silence, it took less time than a coffee break for the truth to come out. He had been right there the entire time. His farm was close enough that he could have watched the search parties from his window. Staringa was born in 1967, was married with 2 children, and had taken over the family dairy farm. He had no prior criminal record and was declared fully accountable by psychiatric evaluation. He described the act as impulsive. Seeing Vatstra cycling alone at night, he was struck by the thought, "You're mine," pulled a pocket knife, and attacked. He took her life in panic to avoid being caught for what he had done. He stayed silent for 13 years to spare his children the truth about their father. Staringa was sentenced to 18 years imprisonment on April 19, 2013. Neither side appealed. He was conditionally released on November 16, 2024, after serving 2/3 of his sentence under strict conditions, including a regional exclusion zone covering all of northern Netherlands for approximately 6 years. The Vatstra family stated, "We as a family will never be free of our loss. Therefore, it feels much too soon and unfair." Father Bauk Vatstra passed away in March 2024 of lung cancer, months before Staringa's release. He spent 13 years not knowing. He spent 12 more knowing, and he never saw the end of it. 13 years of blame directed at the wrong people, and the answer was a dairy farmer 2.5 kilometers away. But the next case involves the journalist who helped that family, a man who spent his career solving other people's cases, until organized crime decided to silence him. Peter R. de Vries. On the evening of July 6, 2021, the most famous crime journalist in the Netherlands left the RTL Boulevard television studio near Leidseplein in central Amsterdam. He had just appeared on the program. While walking to his car at approximately 7:30, he was shot 5 times, including in the head, on the Lange Leidsevaarstraat, one of the busiest streets in the center of Amsterdam. It was still daylight. People were sitting at outdoor cafes. A resident heard 5 shots and found him lying in a pool of blood, unable to speak, but still alive. Paramedics arrived within minutes, and he was transported to VU University Medical Center. He never regained consciousness. He passed away 9 days later, on July 15th at age 64. The Netherlands lost the one journalist the criminal underworld feared most. So who ordered the hit on the man who had spent his life exposing the truth? And will anyone ever be held fully accountable? Peter Rudolf de Vries, born November 14, 1956 in Aalsmeer, was a household name for over 3 decades. Beginning at De Telegraaf in 1978, he transitioned to his own television program, which helped solve more than a dozen cases. He won an International Emmy Award in 2008 for his coverage of the Natalie Holloway disappearance, having secretly filmed Joran van der Sloot's confession. He wrote definitive books on the Heineken kidnapping, exposed connections between Princess Mabel and a crime figure, and fought for years to free wrongfully convicted men. His tattooed motto, "On bended knee is no way to be free." The taking of de Vries was the third in the circle around Nabil B., the crown witness in the Marengo mega trial against drug kingpin Ridwan Taghi. The pattern was chilling and deliberate. Nabil B's brother Redwan was taken in March 2018. B's lawyer Dirk Weersum was shot outside his home in September 2019. First the witness's family, then the witness's lawyer, then the witness's confidant. De Vries had served as Nabil B's confidant and advisor from 2019 to 2020. Stepping into the role, knowing full well what had happened to the two men before him. The shooting was planned for weeks. Kamil Egiert, 35, Polish, was originally hired as the shooter for 80,000 euros, but made multiple reconnaissance trips and ultimately refused. A planned substitute backed out on July 5th. In a last-minute scramble on the day of the attack itself, Delano Geerman, 21 from Rotterdam, a former So You Think You Can Dance contestant and aspiring rapper with no prior history of this kind of act, was arranged as the shooter and carried out the attack the same day he was recruited. He went from being contacted to pulling the trigger within hours. After the shooting, Geerman texted, "Bro, that bullet shot right through him twice. Everything squirted." Both Geerman and Egiert were arrested within 45 minutes on the A4 motorway near Leidschendam. The weapon was found in their stolen getaway car. The trial in Amsterdam's high-security bunker courtroom resulted in the June 2024 verdict. Delano Geerman received 28 years, Kamil Egiert 28 years, and Christian M 26 years and 1 month. On appeal, in December 2025, sentences were slightly adjusted. Geerman and Egiert each received 27.5 years. A 10th suspect, Rayleigh B., a gang leader from Curaçao allegedly directing operations from prison, was arrested in April 2025 and faces a separate trial. The Marengo mega-trial concluded in February 2024, with Ridwan Taghi receiving life imprisonment. Prosecutors are convinced Taghi ordered De Vries's taking, but he was never formally charged in connection with it. The investigation into the mastermind remains ongoing, the man who spent his career finding answers for others. And the question of who truly ordered his end may never be fully answered. The journalist who solved cases for others became a case himself. But the next case involves someone else who was supposed to protect people, a police officer whose colleagues described him as friendly and gentle, and the woman who saw through that facade. Sanne Hertgers. On October 8, 2023, a 31-year-old woman was found in her apartment at De Weme in central Winterswijk, Gelderland. She had moved there just 2 months earlier after leaving her estranged husband. That afternoon, a witness saw him intercept her on the street and force her back to her apartment during an obvious argument. Their dinner appointment at a nearby restaurant at 6 in the evening came and went with her chair empty. Her father went to her apartment, looked through a half-open window, and discovered the scene. So who was the man she had finally left? And why did no one see what was coming? Sanne Hertgers was originally from Brummen, Gelderland. Her father Wim owned a transport company. She had 3 siblings. Trained as both a security guard and a beautician, Sanne ran a beauty salon in Doetinchem, described as spontaneous, tough, and energetic. She played football, did kickboxing, and rode motorcycles. In 2015, she suffered a stillborn baby, and her family harbors suspicions about the circumstances, as her husband opposed an autopsy. Her husband was Frank Berendsen, 50, a police motorcycle officer with Politie Oost-Nederland. They met when she was 18 to 19, and he was approximately 38, an 18-year age gap. They married after just 8 months, a pace that did not allow Sanne's family to see the warning signs. He exhibited classic coercive control. He controlled her bank card, constantly checked her phone, forced himself on her, and isolated her from friends. He decided who she could see, where she could go, and when she could leave the house. His police colleagues described him as friendly and gentle, the kind of man no one would suspect. That is what made it so dangerous. After Sanne moved out in July 2023, he continued to follow and harass her, using his law enforcement background to intimidate. Telling her his colleagues were keeping an eye on her, he weaponized his badge. She moved to a new apartment in a new town, and he still found her. Sanne was found unclothed, having slid off the bed. Frank's body lay on top of hers. Her father Wim described it as a final, sickening attempt to show his power over her, even after death. She had been harmed, and her carotid artery was cut with her own bread knife. Frank then took his own life with the same weapon. Because the perpetrator was already gone, no criminal trial took place. Sana's passing was not officially registered as femicide by police, even when her family explicitly requested it. No autopsy was performed, and the family was not informed of their right to request one. Wim and Monique Hertgers founded Stichting Sana voor Altijd 31, Foundation Sana Forever 31, and converted one of their company's truck trailers into a mobile cinema showing a short film about femicide. They drive it themselves. The truck has traveled through the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, and England, stopping in town squares and parking lots where people can step inside and watch a 10-minute film about what happened to their daughter. Their advocacy has contributed to parliamentary proposals for a national action plan against femicide, including criminalizing non-fatal strangulation and creating a dedicated emergency phone number for those experiencing domestic concerns. In August 2025, Sana's portrait at a femicide exhibition in Arnhem was vandalized by two men, prompting police to release surveillance photos. Even in death, someone tried to silence her story. Her father made sure they could not. If you've made it this far and enjoy deep dives into the most shocking criminal cases, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell icon. Anne Faber. On September 29, 2017, a 25-year-old arts management professional left her home in Rijnsweerd, Utrecht, at 4:30 in the afternoon for a solo bicycle ride through the countryside near Den Dolder. At 6:50, she sent her boyfriend a rain-soaked selfie, flashing a peace sign. That was her last message. She never arrived at the party she was heading to. Her bicycle was found abandoned. A massive search began, and when the truth came out, it revealed a chain of institutional failures so severe that 3 separate government investigations were launched. So who was waiting near that forest path? And how was he free in the first place? Anne Faber was born on December 15, 1991, in Arnhem. She held a bachelor's degree in business administration from Radboud University Nijmegen and a master's in cultural economics from Erasmus University Rotterdam, with internships at the Mauritshuis and In Science Film Festival. She worked at Het Huis Utrecht, a performing arts organization. Her former employer called her the glue between people. She lived with her boyfriend, Nathaniel Fitter. The man who took Anne's life was Michael Panhuis, known as Michael P., 27 at the time. He was living at the Utrecht Psychiatric Clinic in Den Dolder. That morning, he had snorted 10 to 15 Ritalin pills and left the clinic freely, carrying a knife, screwdrivers, and zip ties. Riding a stolen, uninsured scooter, he collided with Anne on a forest path. When she wanted to call the police, he pulled the knife, forced her into the woods, and harmed her. When Anne spotted a passing cyclist and screamed for help, he cut her throat. He buried her initially in a shallow grave. Then that night borrowed his mother's car, dug a deeper pit near Zeewold, and reburied the body after stripping and washing it to remove evidence. The failures that enabled this were staggering, and each one compounded the next. Michael P. had been convicted in 2012 of harming 2 teenage girls and robbery, receiving 11 to 12 years. During his original trial, he refused psychiatric evaluation, which under Dutch law at the time prevented the court from imposing TBS, mandatory psychiatric treatment. No evaluation meant no TBS. No TBS meant a fixed prison sentence with a definite end date. The consequence was catastrophic. When he was transferred to the Utrecht Clinic in Den Dolder for gradual reintegration into society, the clinic was never informed of his convictions involving minors because he refused to authorize sharing his criminal record. And the law at the time allowed that refusal. A convicted offender with a history of harming teenage girls was placed in an open psychiatric facility, and the staff treating him had no idea what he had done. He was treated only for aggression and substance issues. given extensive unsupervised leave, including trips into town and overnight stays, and allowed to roam freely. He bragged to fellow inmates before his transfer. "As soon as I get my freedoms, I'll take one out." He told people what he was going to do, and no one passed that information along. No risk assessment was ever conducted. 3 separate government investigations by the Justice Inspectorate, the Health Inspectorate, and the Dutch Safety Board all concluded there were fundamental deficiencies in the system. The Minister for Legal Protection acknowledged the government failed to protect society. At trial in July 2018, premeditation could not be proven under the strict Dutch legal standard, but Michael P. was convicted of qualified manslaughter, a charge that carries the same maximum sentence as deliberate taking of life because the act was committed to conceal another crime. He received 28 years plus TBS with compulsory psychiatric treatment. The appeal court confirmed the sentence in July 2019. Then the Supreme Court intervened. In June 2020, the Hoge Raad reduced the sentence by 4 months to 27 years and 8 months because Michael P. had sustained a broken shoulder during his violent arrest by police. The court ruled the injuries constituted a violation of his rights. The Faber family called the reduction a slap in the face. 4 months taken off the sentence of a man who took their daughter's life because officers were too rough when they caught him. In April 2020, he was caught planning an escape from Vught prison with a co-inmate. He was transferred to a higher security wing. After his prison sentence ends, TBS treatment begins and can be extended indefinitely, meaning he may never be released. The case drove sweeping reforms to information sharing between prisons and psychiatric clinics across the Netherlands. A man who should never have been free. But the next case involves a body that has never been found, a confession made to an ex-girlfriend, and a dead cousin who tried to tell the truth from TikTok. Wico van Leeuwen. On May 17, 2022, a 48-year-old gardener and landscaper from Borculo, Gelderland, visited an acquaintance, then departed on his bicycle saying he was heading to a specific address on Heerlijkheidstraat. He was never seen alive again. His body has never been found. So how do you convict someone when there is no body? And the only confession came secondhand from an ex-girlfriend? Wico van Leeuwen was a gardener who found clients through Facebook and was described as respected in his neighborhood for his work. He was a father to at least 3 children. He struggled with addiction, borderline personality disorder, and financial difficulties. He had been evicted from his rental home in nearby Need in early 2022 after a cannabis plantation was found there, and had been staying with various acquaintances, moving from couch to couch, including at the home of his eventual attacker on Heerlijkheidstraat in Borculo. He was in a vulnerable position, dependent on the goodwill of people around him, with no stable address and no safety net. One of those people would be the last to see him. According to the perpetrator's confession to his ex-girlfriend, Mart B., 28, dragged Wico out of bed, pushed him down the stairs, and cut his throat with a knife. Blood was found dripping from the stairway to the cellar. The body reportedly lay at the bottom of the stairs for approximately 2 days before Mart B. disposed of it. He gave multiple contradictory accounts of what he did with the remains, claiming variously that he put the body in a barrel and transported it to Germany for cremation, or that a cousin took it to a waste disposal site. Neither account has been verified. The body has never been recovered. Wico was reported missing in July 2022, 2 months after he vanished. In October 2022, Mart B.'s ex-girlfriend went to police reporting that B. had confessed the act to her. The NFI confirmed blood on the staircase matched Wico's DNA. Evidence showed stair treads had been replaced and freshly painted over after May 17th. An attempt to cover the physical evidence that failed because trace amounts of blood had soaked through. Mart B. was arrested on February 27, 2023. He initially blamed his deceased cousin George, who had passed away in November 2022 and could no longer defend himself or be questioned. It seemed like the perfect deflection. Blame someone who cannot answer. But George had left something behind. Before his passing, George had posted on TikTok, "I am the main suspect in a disappearance, and my little cousin is getting away with it." A dead man, speaking from beyond the grave through a social media video, pointing directly at the person the courts would eventually convict. George tried to tell the truth while he was alive. Nobody listened until it was too late. Courts found Mart B's alternative scenario not credible. The Rechtbank Gelderland sentenced Mart B to 15 years imprisonment on August 2, 2024, for manslaughter and disposal of a body. On appeal in November 2025, the sentence was reduced to 12 years. The victim's son made an emotional appeal in court. "Tell us where Wico is." Mart B has never answered. He has never revealed the location of the remains. A father whose children cannot bury him. A man convicted without a body. And the one person who knows where he is refuses to say. A body that has never been found, and a family that cannot grieve. But the next case involves a dating app. A psychiatrist who opened his door to a stranger, and a man who had done this before. Jan van Greensven. On the night of October 12th into the 13th, 2023, around 2:30 in the morning, residents of a building called De Vijf Werelddelen on Handelsplein in Rotterdam-Zuid called emergency services after hearing a loud bang and seeing fire. Firefighters extinguished the blaze and found a 60-year-old man badly wounded inside. He had been shot in the forehead from close range, suffered multiple stab and cut wounds, and the apartment had been deliberately set on fire. He was pronounced deceased at the scene. The man and his attacker had met through a dating platform. So who was the man who answered the ad? And what had he done before? Dr. Jan van Greensven was born in 1963. He was a psychiatrist at Sint Antonius Ziekenhuis in Nieuwegein in Utrecht, where he had worked since 2008. He studied biology and medicine at Erasmus University Rotterdam, earned his PhD at Leiden University, and trained as a psychiatrist in Apeldoorn. Published on topics including electroconvulsive therapy and optogenetics, he was known for exceptional empathy and thoroughness with his patients. He lived alone in the Rotterdam apartment overlooking the Entrepot Haven. He and the perpetrator had arranged a meeting via Bullchat, a dating platform for homosexual men. It was the perpetrator's second visit. The perpetrator was Brettley D., 24, a Rotterdam man with no fixed address. He was identified through CCTV footage showing him at Rotterdam-Zuid station around midnight carrying a visible firearm, and through DNA on a cigarette butt and drinking glass left at the scene. His history was devastating. As a teenager, he had been convicted of attempted manslaughter after a serious assault following an encounter with a man claiming self-defense. He received 7 years of youth TBS, mandatory psychiatric treatment for young offenders. That treatment was deemed unsuccessful, with his conditions worsening rather than improving during the program. He was released back into society despite the failure of the very system designed to rehabilitate him. While at large after harming Van Greensven, still a wanted man whose face had not yet been released publicly, on October 20th to 21st, 2023, Brettley D. traveled to Zutphen, a town over an hour away, and met another man via the same dating platform. He stayed at this man's home overnight. Then he attacked him, stabbing him in the leg and attempting to strangle him. The victim survived. Brettley D. allegedly told him, "I'm wanted in Rotterdam. I murdered someone. If you had Googled me, you wouldn't have let me in." He was announcing himself. He was telling his victims exactly who they were dealing with, and then harming them anyway. Police released his full name and photo to the public. offered a €25,000 reward, and arrested him at Hotel Multatuli in Amsterdam. On October 25th, after over 500 tips poured in within days, psychiatric evaluation at the Peter Baan Centrum revealed antisocial, narcissistic, and borderline personality disorders with high psychopathy, all chronic and worsening. On October 1st, 2025, the Rotterdam District Court convicted Bretley D. of manslaughter. Not deliberate taking of life, as premeditation was not proven, along with arson and illegal weapons possession. The sentence was 8 years imprisonment plus TBS with compulsory psychiatric treatment, significantly lower than the 18 years the prosecution had demanded, due to diminished accountability. The TBS measure can be extended indefinitely. A psychiatrist who spent his career treating people with the very conditions his attacker carried. A dating app that connected two strangers. And a system that had already tried and failed to treat the man who came through his door. A man the system had already tried and failed to fix. But the next case has been waiting 34 years for a verdict, and it may end with the one outcome the family feared most. Louis Van Damme. On January 27, 1992, a 64-year-old businessman was found by his son and an employee in his garage office on Kritsingerstraat in The Hague's Transvaalkwartier. He was sitting in his office chair, wearing his coat, holding his keys, about to leave for the day. He had been shot 6 times from behind at close range, 2 in the back of the head and 4 in the back. His wallet, containing nearly 1,800 guilders, was untouched. Nothing was stolen. Police concluded this was an execution by someone the victim knew and let in. So who walked into that garage, and why has it taken 34 years to reach a courtroom? Louis Luc Van Damme was a widower and entrepreneur who owned Garage de Mar, a car repair business, along with a taxi company and a paint business. After his wife's passing in 1991, he had begun helping a neighborhood woman who was being harmed by her husband, eventually developing a romantic relationship with her. He was described as a socially engaged businessman with no criminal background. He was not looking for trouble. He was trying to help someone, and that decision cost him his life. Police quickly focused on Ruben B., then 37, the woman's husband. Van Damme had kept a diary documenting everything, a detailed written record of the threats, the phone calls, the escalating danger. He wrote that she called him every day crying, telling him she was afraid her husband would hurt her, perhaps even take her life. He was documenting his own approaching end without realizing it. In October 1991, someone in a dark blue Mercedes matching Ruben B.'s car had tried to run Van Damme over. Days before his passing, Van Damme went to police, trembling and crying about the threats. Wiretapped phone calls revealed Ruben B.'s contact with a known weapons supplier. Ruben B.'s teenage son had an appointment with Van Damme at the garage on the afternoon of the incident, and his fingerprints were found at the scene. Ruben B. was arrested on February 18, 1992. But the prosecution suddenly withdrew the indictment when the defense claimed police had used unauthorized surveillance, specifically a directional microphone, making the key evidence inadmissible. Ruben B.'s son and a third suspect were also arrested and released. The case went cold. One procedural ruling and 34 years of silence followed. In 2020, the case appeared on the National Cold Case Calendar, a Dutch initiative that distributes unsolved cases to the public through calendars placed in prisons and detention centers. An anonymous tip in November 2022 suggested Ruben B. may have coerced his teenage son to carry out the act. That tip breathed new life into a case that had been dormant for 3 decades. Ruben B. was rearrested on March 5, 2025, at age 70, 33 years after his first arrest for the same incident. His brother and nephew were arrested in August 2025, but later released. At the February 2026 trial, the prosecution demanded 14 years, arguing the plan came from Ruben B.'s mind. The defense countered that the forensic evidence was essentially unchanged from 1992 and demanded acquittal. In a shocking development on March 7, 2026, Reuben B. was unexpectedly released from pre-trial detention weeks before the scheduled verdict, widely interpreted as signaling an expected acquittal. The verdict is scheduled for March 24, 2026. Van Damme's son expressed deep disappointment. For the family, the absence of complete answers is extremely painful. 34 years. A man who wrote in his diary that he was afraid. Police who had wiretaps and witnesses, and a suspect who may walk free because a procedural error in 1992 poisoned the entire case. Will the verdict on March 24th change anything? Or will this family join the list of those who waited decades for nothing? 34 years, and the answer may still be nothing. But the final case on this list did produce a conviction, one that changed Dutch law, because a 16-year-old girl reported her stalker 4 times and nobody stopped him. Humaira Uz. On December 18, 2018, at approximately 1 in the afternoon, a student at the Rotterdam Design College spotted a familiar car outside her school. It belonged to the man who had been following her for over a year. She ran back inside. He chased her through the building into the bicycle storage basement, where he shot her multiple times. He then stepped over her body, walked to his car, drove away, and called emergency services to confess. Several students witnessed everything. Her father was waiting on the other side of the school to pick her up. She was approximately 45 minutes away from a scheduled police appointment to report the man once again. So how does someone report their stalker 4 separate times and still end up cornered in a basement? Humaira, whose full name was Humaira Ergincanli, was a 16-year-old Dutch-Turkish student due to take her final exams that year. Described as adventurous, happy, and strong, she lived in constant fear in her final months. Her father drove her to and from school every day because she was terrified. Her ex-boyfriend was Bekir E., 31 at the time. They had met in July 2017. He claimed to be 24. She said she was over 18. She broke off the relationship in September 2017 after discovering his true age. Humiliated because his social circle was calling him names, he launched a relentless campaign of harassment. Countless threatening messages, including explicit promises to harm her, fake accounts on social media, and sending her a photo of himself posing with 2 firearms. Humaira reported Bekir E. to police on 4 separate occasions, on May 8th, May 30th, June 1st, and December 11th, 2018. 4 times in 7 months. Each time she walked into a police station, sat down, and described the threats she was receiving. Each time she was taken seriously enough to generate a file, but no one connected the files. No one built a picture of escalating danger. In August 2018, a police judge convicted him of assault and threats, giving him 6 weeks in prison, 3 of which were suspended, and a contact ban, 6 weeks, for a man who was sending photographs of himself with firearms. He broke that ban repeatedly, without consequence. Nobody followed up. Nobody checked whether the ban was being observed. A devastating October 2019 inspectorate report found that police, prosecutors, probation services, and domestic agencies all seriously failed Humaira. No risk assessment was ever performed. Had it been done, even once, it would have flagged her safety risk as very high. She had no fixed police contact person. Every time she went in to report, she had to start from the beginning with a new officer who had no context, no history, and no understanding of how dangerous the situation had become. 4 reports, 4 chances to intervene, 4 failures. The Rotterdam District Court in December 2019 acquitted Bekir E. of deliberate premeditated taking of life, convicting him instead of manslaughter and sentencing him to 14 years plus TBS, sparking massive outrage. Family members screamed, banged on courtroom glass, and fainted. On appeal at the Hague Court of Appeal on June 25, 2021, the conviction was upgraded to deliberate taking of life, with a sentence of 20 years imprisonment plus TBS with compulsory psychiatric treatment. The court ruled his history of threats, weapon acquisition, targeted reconnaissance of the school, and cold-blooded execution all proved premeditation. He did not appeal to the Supreme Court, a strategic decision because newer, stricter release rules would apply if the case were retried. The case was a primary catalyst for raising the maximum sentence for manslaughter from 15 to 25 years, enacted by the Dutch Parliament in 2022 to 2023. Additional reforms included improved training for police on recognizing stalking patterns, introduction of risk assessment tools, and pilot programs for GPS devices, alerting potential victims when perpetrators approach. 10 million euros was secured for training officers on femicide threats. Bekir E. is serving his 20-year sentence. Under older conditional release rules, he could potentially be eligible around 2032. Followed by potentially years of TBS treatment that can be extended indefinitely. But a January 2024 follow-up inspectorate report found that stalking victims still lack proper support. Fixed police contact persons remain absent. Restraining orders are inconsistently monitored. The law changed. The sentences changed. But when Humaira's family was asked what has actually changed on the ground, their answer was clear: not enough. 4 reports, a changed law, and a family still asking whether the next girl will be any safer. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.